In this next chapter, we're going to learn how to build Angular forms. The first thing we need to do is head to our containers folder and we're going to create a new folder. So by this, we're going to create a new container component. So what we're going to do is passenger and then dash viewer. So that's going to be the folder name. Inside of here, you'll want to create a new file. So we'll do passenger dash viewer dot component .ts. I'm going to copy this. We're also going to create the Sass file, so we're going to do .scss. So hopefully inside the passenger viewer in the containers, you should have passenger-viewer.component and the corresponding Sass file. Now we don't need the Sass file just yet, but we'll use it in the future videos in this chapter. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's create our first component. We'll import it from the Angular core as per usual. Now for this one, what we're going to do is create a selector and we're going to call it passenger-viewer. So this is going to essentially allow us to view a particular passenger. Now we'll also set up the style URLs because we have our Sass file. So we'll do passenger and then dash viewer.component.scss. So that finds the file that we just set up here. So passengerviewer.component.scss. So these are all hooked up. And we'll just create a simple template and we'll just put an empty div inside. Now what we want to do is first export a class called passengerViewerComponent. So we're exporting this class. We'll use a constructor because this is going to be a smart or a container component. So we're actually going to inject our service into here. And we're also going to use ng-on-init. So we need to go and import this ng-on-init. And we also need to implement it here. We'll go up to the top and we'll simply import the on-init. So this basically sets up our component. And inside this ng-on-init, we can then go ahead and start making data requests. Now, what we want to actually do inside of here is inject our passenger service, make a call to a specific passenger, and then display it in here. And we're going to use some forms inside a stateless component. So this passenger viewer is a stateful component. It's a container component, and it's going to provide data to a stateless component. So let's go ahead and import our service. So we'll do import. And then the passenger dashboard service, and we'll import that from .. And you can see TypeScript gives us passenger dashboard.service. So hopefully you should have this imported. Now, because we're obviously dealing with passenger objects, we need to import our interface. So that's the next thing we'll do. We'll import the passenger, and again, we're going to have to go back a few levels. So we'll do .. and then .. models. And then inside of here, we're going to have that passenger interface. So you can see that our service is going to be dealing with passengers. So on our actual constructor, what we want to do is first inject this service. So inside the constructor, we will do private and then passenger service, and that's going to be of type passenger dashboard service. So Angular is going to use this token and inject it as this.passenger service. So now we have this available inside the ng-on-init. We want to essentially talk to an existing passenger. Now we don't have a method set up for this, so you can see here I have get passengers. However, we're going to set up a get passenger, which is just going to take a unique ID such as 2, 1, or 3. So we'll default it to 1. We'll then simply subscribe. And the data that we're going to get back is, of course, going to be a single passenger. So again, we're going to use our type checking here. Inside the arrow function, what we're going to do is assign it to a particular passenger property, which means that we need to add it to our class. So we'll do passenger on the class, and it's going to be of type passenger. So we've told the component class to have a passenger property of type passenger. So inside of here, we can do this.passenger equals data, which is the data that's just been returned from our subscription. Now you can see this red underline because we don't have this getPassenger method. So let's go ahead and jump into our service because we can go ahead and create this method now. Now you should be familiar with this, and this is actually going to be very simple to implement. Now we've got 2 red underscores because it says a duplicate function. So we only want a getPassenger. So we're only returning a single passenger, which means that we are not returning an array of passengers. So we can remove the array. So we can just return the observable with the passenger. Now for this get request, we need to actually pass in this ID, which is going to be a number. Now you can see in the viewer component that we're actually passing in a number to the getPassenger call. So inside the dashboard, we're just going to expect an ID. It's going to be of type number, and we need to now pass this into this string. So what we'll do is an ES6 string, we'll say passenger API, and then we'll do / and we'll do another $, and then just ID. And this is just using our passenger API, which is our constant up here. So when we pass an ID in, it's going to be something like 1 or 2 or 3, or however many passengers that we potentially have. So all you can do after that is just simply save it out. So to display this in our component, first of all, we'll just do passenger, and we'll just convert this string to JSON. So at the moment, if we flick over to our app component, we are hard coding the passenger dashboard. Now, what we want to really do is actually use this passenger viewer, so we can actually build out these components individually. And what we'll do in the final chapter is then set them up so we can actually route to them, so this can be dynamically done. So if I save this, we'll actually get an error because the passenger viewer isn't exported from our module. It's also not included in the module. So let's go up and fix this problem. So what I'm going to do is go below in our containers, and I'll do import passenger and then viewer component, and then from, and then ./containers/passenger, and you can see viewer is now available. And inside of here, we have the component that we want. So hopefully you should have import passenger viewer component from containers/passenger viewer.component. So now that you've got that, you can simply copy this value. And just like before, we need to include it. Now I'm including it here because these are just generic components underneath, and these are our container components. So that's why I'm including it in this order. Now for us to actually use this component inside of our app, we need to then obviously export it. So what we can do at this point is change our export so we can actually remove the dashboard component, and we can export the passenger viewer component. So this will allow us to then use it in this external module. So now that this is actually set up, we can close off the app, we can close off the module, and we can go ahead to the browser and see our passenger object. So hopefully in the browser, you should see your individual passenger object with the ID of 1. So let's go back to the code. So in this video, even though we haven't actually used any forms, we have set up our first container component. In the next video, we're going to build out our form component. So this is going to live inside components. We're then going to pass this passenger object. We're going to change our data structure very slightly just so we can use some different form directives that Angular provides us. And we'll actually include the forms module. So now that this is set up, we're ready to go ahead with our forms.